Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for attending. Uh, it's a very important topic that we're very excited to host a panel to discuss. And hope you enjoy the session. Mina, over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Welcome everybody. We're really excited to have everyone here for this very important and timely discussion. I think from dismantling systemic violence and racism in the US to creating more accessible economies in India, to really delivering conflict-sensitive aid in Central Africa, we're seeing young people around the world come together and really show up for their communities and be the actors for peace and security that we know that they are. On top of that, the global pandemic of COVID-19 has really pushed young people around the world to demand structural reform and equity. And we're really seeing this be a tipping point for this generation. One thing that we are seeing is that the pandemic has shown that youth are amongst the most vulnerable to the impact of the pandemic as well, especially in conflict-affected countries where they make up the majority of the population. We're seeing an increase in disparities in education, healthcare, and economic prosperity, leaving many young people grappling with how they're going to recover and build the world anew after the pandemic. The pandemic has also highlighted the world's increasing reliance on the true heroes and sheroes of our society, which are healthcare providers and essential workers, where in developing countries, youth make up the majority of those workers. And while young people have been scapegoated as the problems or the spreaders of the virus, the reality is that they're on the front lines of providing life-saving resources and delivering conflict-sensitive aid. At Search for Common Ground, we saw this reality during the Ebola crisis in Africa, and we're seeing it come true during the coronavirus. So in response to this global pandemic, to the surge of youth activism, and to the increasingly critical role we see young people playing, Search for Common Ground recently released a policy paper, Youth in the COVID-19 Crisis in Conflict-Affected Contexts, which highlights the critical role that young people play in crisis response, which explores the various systemic challenges that exclude them from society and provides concrete recommendations for policymakers and programmers to better engage and partner with youth in peace and security processes. You can download this policy paper on the same link on Search for Common Ground's website that you used to register for this webinar, and follow it along during our conversation. Today, we're joined by young peace builders from around the world who are on the front lines of mitigating COVID-19 and are also leading the global youth peace and security agenda in their communities at a grassroots, national, and global levels. We will hear from these leaders today about their critical and inspiring work to build peace amid a global pandemic. If people have questions that they would like to ask the panelists throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the chat feature on the side, and we will try to address those questions during the event. If not, we will also have a live Q&A session at the end of our event, in which you can also send questions in the chat box. For the duration of the webinar, audience members' cameras will be off and your mics will be automatically muted. So if you do have any questions or concerns or technical difficulties, also use the chat box and Nick will help support you. You can follow the conversation live on Twitter using the hashtags Youth for Peace and Yes for YPS, both with the number 4 in between. So as we get started, I will allow the panelists themselves to introduce themselves. 2 of our panelists are calling in via phone audio and 2 of them are using webcams. So unfortunately, you're not able to see 2 of our panelists, but you will hear their lovely voices. To briefly introduce myself, which I didn't do at the beginning and I apologize for, my name is Mina Ayazi. I am a Youth Peace and Security Advisor at Search for Common Ground, where I'm working on building out the YPS agenda in the United States and working on the Youth Peace and Security Act of 2020. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our lovely panelists to please briefly introduce yourselves and maybe talk about some challenges that have risen for you during COVID-19 and how you and your peers are addressing those challenges and continuing your peace building work among the pandemic. Achaleke, I would love to start with you. If you could please introduce yourselves and talk about some of the challenges COVID-19 has presented to you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I must say it's a great pleasure to be part of this meeting. My name is Christian Achalike, and I serve as the National Coordinator of Local Youth Conduct Cameroon, and also serve as the Pan-Commonwealth Coordinator of the Commonwealth Youth Peace Ambassadors Network. And my background for the past 14 years has been on peace and security and civil society. And my involvement in this domain is based on my past and a childhood of growing up and experiencing violence on hand. And so for this period, I dedicated myself to work with young people to prevent the spread of conflict and also to ensure that we build sustainable peace. And in a context like Cameroon, where I'm from, where we have conflict at different fronts, be it Boko Haram insurgency, and of course, in the English-speaking regions of the country, our role as young people has become much more important because continuously we've been able to show that we are more of peace builders than troublemakers. Well, the coming of COVID came with a big hit, especially to some of us in the African continent, where it came taking our healthcare system by surprise, and a lot of panic, a lot of fear, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misinformation, and looking at what it takes to be able to prevent this pandemic. The various preventive measures actually went a long way to affect some of the drivers of conflict in our context. I take, for example, there was a need for people to stay at home. We are in a context where state does not have the necessary resources to even take care of its own activities, not to talk of when people do not have jobs. So we saw situations where people were staying at home. We saw situations where people were having issues of lack of finances to be able to effectively engage in their day-to-day activities. We saw an increase in violence in homes. We saw young people not going to school. So there was a lot that was happening. And we saw situations where even the violent extremist groups were using these conversations, were using the realities of the pandemic to be able to strengthen their propaganda and their conversations of the inability of the state to effectively deliver to its people. So, I mean, these were the kind of challenges that we're facing, and that had a direct impact on our work because we were seeing gaps, we were seeing more possibilities of conflict emerging, we were seeing, spaces where if it's not effectively handled, people were being afraid, people were panicking because they were not sure of the right information to use, and the whole issue of inner peace was being affected. I take an example of a woman who lives not far away from our office, and we had 2 suspected cases around our office. And she met me one day on the road and told me, my son, your team is working on development. Now this is COVID. What are you people doing? I mean, these are the kind of questions that we've been asked because people felt, insecure. People knew that there's no access to potable water that you wash your hands with. People were not sure of who to talk to, and we saw a whole challenge of mental health. So this really affected our work because we could not even work from the office. We had to stay at home. We had to develop a new kind of life, which is not really ours because the internet service is very poor. So at the level of organization, we witnessed these challenges to be able to deliver our daily roles, and even our beneficiaries and young people that we've worked with within networks that we've set up. For example, we set up a youth mediators network in Cameroon. This is a network of young people who are supposed to be at the front line to engage with community, to do mediation in DDR, to do frontline conversations, but they could not deliver these key tools and aspects of their day-to-day engagement. So we saw this big problem in the fact that we could not reach out to communities the way we were doing, and these communities themselves were not ready or have the resources to be able to be reached out to using media, using social media, or even phone calls. So I mean, these are the challenges that we faced, and it greatly affected our ability to build peace the way we were to build. Now, this pandemic gave possibility for three kinds of possibilities. The first was, do we sit and fold our hands and feel that we need to just sit at home and do nothing? That is the first thing we had at the back of our minds. The second thing we said, do we continue with what we've been doing and see where we end? Or do we innovate, try to readapt, and see how we could blend our current peace building initiatives with the change in time and with the pandemic? These were the thoughts that we had. And these thoughts are usually also distorted based on the resources that you have. It was a bigger problem. You will not see any donor starting to talk about, maybe for you to continue doing work with mediators in the community. Things started shifting, and resources that we were hoping to get to deliver our role in our communities got very challenged. But we decided to take the third option, which was not to sit and fold our hands, which was not just for us to continue doing the basic peace building work we're doing, but to be able to be innovative, to look at the pandemic and look at how we could be able to use our existing structures and programs for peace that we have developed to be able to respond to this pandemic. I take, for example, one of the things that we decided to do for the past 3 to 4 years, we've been working in prison settings where we've been supporting former violent and violent extremist offenders to reintegrate back into the community, and we provide them rehabilitation while in prison. And we were calling them prisonpreneurs. Now, with the challenge of COVID spreading in prison, it caused a lot of fear. A lot of people called for the government to release some of the prisoners, but we realized that just releasing them could not solve the problem because the rehabilitation programs within prisons are not very good. So rather, we decided to work on building prison resilience by using these prisonpreneurs that we've trained who find themselves in prison or out of prison to be able to produce their own personal preventive equipment rather than expecting for people to come and give them donations, like face masks, because we already provided machines 2-3 years ago, which was funded for them to have the skills. So today they now produce their own masks and use. And when it comes to sensitization and capacity building around preventing COVID, we are working with the same inmates to be able to sensitize their peers and talk to each other. I mean, if we were to sit and say we would not go to prison, we need to release inmates, we were looking at a bigger problem. But we decided to use this already existing group of young people whom we've worked with for 3 years already to be able to be the frontliners in this case. And they are doing this very happily, very joyfully, because they see the challenges which medical personnel are going through at the front line, and they felt that these would be their own opportunities to be at the front line. I mean, these are young people whom sometimes governments will not believe in, but they are the front line doing what they have to do. So this is just an example of how we were able to respond to this. Another key challenge which we had in our context was the increase in prices and the scarcity of personal preventive equipments. It was a bigger problem. Things like hand sanitizers, for example, the prices doubled and even tripled. And we were not even sure of the quality of these personal preventive equipments. So we decided to launch a campaign which is called the Operation One Person, One Hand Sanitizer, where we decided to mobilize young people to form a coalition to see how we could respond to the scarcity in these personal preventive equipment, for example, like hand sanitizer. And we decided to transform our office into a laboratory where so far we've been able to produce over 20,000 bottles of hand sanitizers 100 ml size, and it has been distributed across the country. But these could be possible only because of the fact that we adopted values of cooperation, of partnership, of collaboration. And for the first time in my work, I've had the opportunity to work with pharmacists today, to work with medical doctors who are young people, and lab scientists. And today we have this laboratory, and what we produce has been verified and tested by the Ministry of Public Health in Cameroon. And so far, there is an increase in the need. This provision of sanitizer came to respond to the issue of, high prices and the scarcity. And we've been donating this for free into communities. Another key aspect about this work was the fact that we were trying to also shift the narrative of young people, because there was that, information of young people cannot easily die, to an extent where some of our peers were not taking this serious. They were seeing themselves to be at the margins of this and had nothing to really do about it. But we decided to change this narrative by mobilizing young people to be the solution providers to our parents and the aging who are more at risk. And this helped to raise their awareness. This helped to make them understand that they need to prevent, or they need to protect themselves as a way to prevent their aging parents from suffering, or even themselves from being affected. And this was something we adopted. Another big challenge which we face. Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Achaleke.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? Achaleke, can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for the really great introduction into the insight of the really important work that you and your team are doing. I think you hit the nail on the head and really highlighted how creative and innovative youth can be in crisis responses, as you and your team are, and how your very informal role as bridge builders is making such a big impact on your community. And I would like to turn it over to Mridul, who's calling in from India, to hear more about what you're doing in your work. And Mridul, maybe if you could touch upon some points that Achaleke brought up, and see what it's like for you and your team in India.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mridul. I'm connecting from India. I'm Asia coordinator of UNOI Peace Builders and co-founder of Youth for Peace International, which is an organization based in India. So basically, to give you some context, just consider me as another young peace builder who is a middleman in this supply chain of building and sustaining peace. So whatever work I'm doing might not be directly at the front, might not be directly at the decision making, but somewhere in the middle. The kind of challenges that we have faced, very basic one, of course, because the priorities are changing. So funding has stopped, it has diverted, it got postponed, and because of which a lot of programs has got halted. Also, we haven't been able to see our community and the children's. We work with Rohingya refugee communities. So we haven't been able to see them since mid-December 2019. So initially it was because of this huge protest which was happening in India, in Delhi, against this new Citizenship Amendment Act, and then this COVID-19 happened. So that's a huge setback for us. We are seeing young people and the student leaders who were actually in the front of the non-violent movements in India just before COVID-19. They are now being put in jail. So that's another concern that we are having. Recently, we have got this Global Peace Index 2020, and you can see that there is a study which says that India has the largest number of events over the decades. So we had 800 protests, riots, strikes between 2011 and 18. And it has the largest number of general strikes in the world, which was totaling around 90 general strikes, and only 21% of them were violent. And you see, that's the kind of potential, that's kind of like peace building work or social political work that young people are doing or other agencies are doing. And a lot of social movement have just ended untimely. That's also happening because of this. And there is also a fear that even if I want to do something as a young person, I might be in a symptomatic carrier, a threat to the people whom I'm meeting. So it's a difficult choice to make. Should I go into the deeper community or should I not go? And overall, like how Achalake mentioned, that it's also a mental health related thing. It's affecting us also, being in the same space and not able to do a lot of things that we want to do, and just seeing a lot of threats and a lot of hate speech happening online and not able to contribute something on the ground. So, but how we have been able to mitigate it? So number one, you see young people are always engaging a lot on the remote internships or capacity building programs, and because of which many a times like we are the people who can very easily adapt to the online learning needs or online delivery needs. Like in India, the lockdown started on 23rd of March, and within 1 week we started having these mindfulness sessions, thinking that it might affect people's mental health. So within 1 week, like on 30th of March, we started having these sessions. Then within next 1 week, we started connecting peace builders using Instagram to share their lives during COVID. So that was something which we did, and Mena was one of them who we could feature. And then we also started having a lot of online facilitated dialogues and capacity building programs. The programs which previously we wanted to have in person, we converted them into the online one. So that was easy for us to adapt because we were trained in that ways. Second, some of the examples are that in India, specific Islamic missionary movement was targeted of hate speech, as they got the initial COVID cases during one religious gathering. But then these young people who got treated and after getting recovered, they started donating blood and their plasma for patients and the research. So that's how, like, we are defining, the young people are defining the kind of hate speech which is used for themselves. Similarly, the young researchers, the young journalists, they started using alternate media to cover information around COVID. That's also we saw. Then we started building the capacity of the UNOI members and other young peace builders, because this extraordinary measures, emergency measures taken to slow down the COVID-19 spread, we felt that this can also be a mean to return to authoritarian habits or military rule or violating human rights. So that's also initially we just realized it and we assessed the need and we started doing that. And the last thing is that we thought that we don't want to lose the focus, like even now or even in the future when the COVID situation will be all right, our work, which is youth peace building work, is and will remain important. So we were determined not to lose the focus. We continued our online advocacy work with the US bill or other general related, like we have this online debate, but otherwise also in the national context we are doing a lot of work. So this is how, like, we face some challenges and this is how we mitigated some of them.
Very cool. Thank you, Mujal, for that really great overview. I think one thing that you said that really struck with me is how much you all have been getting creative online. And Achaleke, you said that that was a problem for you all, but for Mujal, it seems really neat, especially that Instagram Live and doing mediation online. One thing we're constantly seeing around the world is young people taking advantage of online platforms and social media in really creative ways to spread really powerful messages. Alvina, I would love to turn it over to you. If you could please introduce yourself and share some challenges you've been seeing with COVID-19 in your work.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, nice to meet you all, and great discussion so far. Yes, so my name is Alvina Alametsa, and I'm a member of the European Parliament. And I'm 27 years old. I'm from Finland, from Helsinki, but originally from Lapland, so the land of the reindeers and beautiful sceneries. And yep, I just started as MAP for this term, and I'm from the Greens. And basically, I was very much inspired by all the thoughts that you shared about what you have done as young activists in your countries and what kind of ideas can bring people together at this time of crisis. Well, personally, as I have just started as an MAP, I have become a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and of course there we have had to make some decisions that are very much tied and related to the COVID-19 crisis, but also youth, peace and security and the role of young people. First of all, of course, we have had to make some choices of what kind of funding is shared and what operations are carried on despite this crisis. And I'm quite happy that most of the operations that have been deployed are still going on, meaning the peace missions and so on. So there has been a lot of struggle there, though, because in this time of crisis, everybody says that we should not invest in development and young people. We have to take care of our own business and own countries and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we've all heard that story. And I think that solidarity is what we need between countries, but also between generations. Definitely, we cannot leave young people to pay the bill of this COVID-19 crisis. Then I've been pushing for the UN Security Council Resolution 2250, the Youth, Peace and Security Resolution, and the implementation of that in the EU level. And just last week, actually, I managed to get this implementation in the Foreign Affairs Committee report. So I very much hope that EU will be more active in this in the future. And now this report was concerning Africa and cooperation with African Union, but I hope also that we can push this resolution for a wider setting and agenda that's happening all over the European Parliament. So I really find it important. I think that young people should be making decisions. They should be included in democracy, in the tables where decisions are being made, and they should be allowed to be present, bring their ideas, and create peace in peace processes, conflict prevention, and conflict resolution. And I very much think that this resolution is important. And actually, I was already working on that resolution 10 years ago as young activist in this Finnish NGO that was very much promoting the UN Security Council Resolution 2250. And now I'm very honored to be able to work on this in the European Parliament. So I guess that's some of my thoughts, what we have been discussing lately. Now for Europe, it's really a big choice whether we are solidar, whether we support other countries, have development funding and take young people into account or not. And I'm pushing for the best, I hope, and also many groups, many MAPs are pushing for the best. But I must say that there is strong opposition, of course. There are many people, many members of parliament who are thinking that young people should be involved, but then in the concrete decisions that is not visible. And of course, there are also people who think that young people should not have a bigger role, that basically young people don't have enough life experience or they don't have enough knowledge on these topics to promote good things. So that's something that I strongly disagree with and very much try to break this kind of stereotype. But yes, I think that was my initial thoughts, and let's continue the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Alvina. I think you saying how you've been working on the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 for so long, and now you're a member of European Parliament, shows the power of activism and the impact your voice can have, and the impact that youth voices can have all over the world. For audience members who are viewing and don't know, the UN Security Council Resolution of 2250 was the first time that the international community recognized the power and agency of young people as actors in peace and security. It was passed in 2015. And since then, we have seen a surge and a catalyst of the global youth peace and security movement, which every single one of our panelists have been such great activists for. So Alvina, thank you so much for your work. And as always, we appreciate Finland's leadership on the youth peace and security agenda. I would like to now turn it over to Aguil, our last panelist on, who is in South Sudan. Aguil, my friend, the floor is yours.
Known by Nonoya. I'm a Gwil Town, known by Nonoya. I'm from the youngest country in the world, South Sudan. I work for Search for Common Ground as the youth officer. I'm an activist, social worker, and a peace builder. So I've been working with the children and young people for many years. I'm currently implementing and leading Youth Talk project. Youth Talk project is a project that aims on amplifying young people voices through media, and it is implemented in 3 countries in Africa: Mali, Central African Republic, and South Sudan. I will go straight forward to talk about the challenges that we faced during COVID-19. The first thing we stopped, we postponed a lot of activities because we can't gather many people in one places. And also we have to change our strategy. Like, we are using media as a tool, but we stopped to conduct direct interviews. So we shifted to mobile interviews. We cannot bring people in the studio or even to move, like the way we used to do. Also, due to the high literacy rate in our country, it is very challenging to raise awareness on COVID-19. It's very hard to make people understand what is COVID-19 and how they can fight it. So we have also to make sure that we use our local languages, because not everyone can understand English or Arabic. In South Sudan, we use 2 languages, Arabic and English, but some even they can't understand these languages. And also the COVID-19 has really caused an economical conflict, because most of our people here depend on the daily income, and it's become very hard with the closure of many places. So many people have no access to food, and whenever you go out to raise awareness to the community, so people expect you to provide some food items to them, so they cannot concentrate much on the information you are coming to share with them. So their interest will be just the amount of the food, or how are you going to support them economically. And also insecurity. In South Sudan, we are facing insecurity incidents in different parts of the country. In the 3 regions, South Sudan has 3 regions. We have Equatorial region, and Bahr Ghazal region, and Upper Nile region. And in these 3 regions, all we are experiencing insecurity incidents, which is making our work to not be easy. We cannot reach everyone, and also poor network system. So in South Sudan, we cannot use internet like the other countries. Maybe like the schools, some people now are studying online, but here is very hard. So you find all the children at home, and this one led to the increase of the criminal rates, because most of the young people are just sitting idle now, doing nothing. And this is really challenging us as youth leaders or peace builders, because like 72% of the population are young people. So you find also some of them now are involved in some criminal act because they have nothing to do. And also, especially raping case, the records in South Sudan from last month up to now is really increasing, and early marriages is also increasing. This is some of the challenges that is really affecting us. And also some youth leaders or some youth who try to raise awareness, they were arrested by the local authorities also in the states. And we had to involve directly as young leaders also to make sure they are released. So, and also the stigma, we have majority of the people, they don't believe that there is something called COVID-19, and others also feel like COVID-19 is just for a specific community, so it can't affect all of them, and this one will still take us back to the high rate of the illiteracy in the country, and also poor infrastructure system, the health facilities, and roads, and even water. So when you tell people keep on washing your hands, they can ask you, where's the water? How can we wash our hands? You see, so that is another challenge. But it's still, you know, we did a lot as young people on the side of Search for Common Ground. We have Lungara Shabab program that is under Youth Talk project, where it is a radio program, because many people have access to radio. So we use the program to make sure that we aware people about COVID-19, and the program is being produced by young adolescents from 14 to 18 years old. We produce the program in Search for Common Ground studio, and it is really helping people. We also use our social media platform, WhatsApp group and Facebook also, to raise awareness. And we were able also to produce a video by our young adolescents, also demonstrating, showing to people how they can also fight COVID-19. We are also using arts, music, pirates, painting, like even we use the gang groups, you know, they are transformed from what they are doing now. They are the one even who are moving outside to, you know, to raise awareness on danger of COVID-19, and they are using, you know, that negative thought to something different. And we also distribute some of the protective equipments like face mask and hand sanitizers to vulnerable people. We were able to go to the POCs and some IDPs come. And the good thing also with the COVID-19, for the first time, to see young people in South Sudan from different communities, different ethnic group coming together as young people, despite the political parties they belong to agree on fighting one thing, which is COVID-19. And we were able to form a national youth task force COVID-19 to make sure that we reached across the country, all parts of the country. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abil, for sharing your experiences and the really amazing work you're doing in South Sudan. I love Logo Shabab, and I think that you all are doing such amazing work with your Youth Talk Radio. And one thing that you said that really struck me was the protection and prevention needs that young people have during this critical moment. Unfortunately, youth activists are some of the most targeted with political violence because they're on the front lines of this really important work. As you all have been speaking, one thing that has really struck me is that it's evident that youth are self-starters and doing really important work on that grassroots, national, and top governance levels. You all are delivering life-saving aid, but at the same time, youth are still facing enormous challenges and are largely excluded from structural processes, which I think leads us into the next part of our conversation, which I'll turn over to Nick to lead. Nick?
For sure. Thanks so much, Mina. You know, one of the motivations behind the policy paper that you can all download from the registration website is to provide some recommendations for how governments, national governments, international organizations, and any kind of other institutions who might be interested, how they can better support the agency of young people and support the initiatives that young people are already leading. And making sure that those initiatives are as effective as possible. So I'd like to ask kind of each panelist to touch on this topic. How can national governments and other kinds of institutions better support young people in responding to COVID specifically, but also more generally to other kinds of crisis situations in contexts that are affected by conflict? Perhaps Mridul, if you'd like to start, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you. So I think a lot of amazing insights has already been covered by the policy paper, which has been developed by Search for Common Ground, and I think that's a very well thought document. So I don't have a lot more to add to it. Just quickly, I have three insights which I would like to share. Number one, for the national governments, I think it is important to understand that youth do not have any spatial superpower, that only young people can solve everything and they should be solving everything. Rather, youth have a specific competitive advantage or comparative advantage to contribute to this issue. So we need to see them as a partner. Youth are often the players who can operate in the spaces where government and other international community might not be able to do that. So that's something very specific. And that's why we are the important powers. So first, these actors need to accept the agency that young people carry and see young people, yeah, like see them as an important partner, see believe in their agency, but also not seeing just them as someone who can work on social entrepreneurship or who is just creative or who is just innovative. Like there is much more than that. Young people have an important social political agency. So by the time you are supporting maybe the social entrepreneurship model which young people are coming up with, but if you are not protecting their rights and safety when the young people are actually calling for human rights violations or protecting the community's rights or minorities' rights, I think that's something where we are making mistakes. So that's something the people in power need to think. Second one is for the adult institutions. So try to see if youth and youth-led organizations can actually provide better solutions for online facilitated sessions, capacity building, or mediations. It seems that there is a scope of improvement when suddenly everyone is forced to go online without actually getting an opportunity to learn sufficiently how to engage in online spaces meaningfully. Maybe young people have that insights. Maybe they are already engaging in this space. So maybe try to partner with them. Then also I have a very specific request to all the INGOs. Uh, I think there has been a lot of surveys and webinars done to raise awareness or to assess the needs. Young people are going through a lot. So definitely you can do a much more than asking them to attend another webinar or filling up the surveys. Coordinate among yourself. Like there has been so much of survey, there should not be a need of having many more surveys, or maybe you can coordinate and you can have the questionnaire prepared in a way where young people can in a short time can provide you the information. There should not be a need where young people are repeatedly being asked to provide information again and again while their actual context is like affected a lot. Also we need to think from a lens that the people who are having access, the young people who are having access to internet, they are over, like how you say, overwhelmed of the kind of online engagement which is suddenly increasing, and the people who are not having access to internet, we are anyway not able to reach out to them. So that's where I'm thinking, like one party is becoming overwhelmed and one party is we are not able to reach out using the online medium. So that's where we need to set a balance and think from a different lens. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Mridul, for that thoughtful answer. I mean, it's really interesting the way you've described the situation where, on one hand, some people are excluded from these kinds of processes and information. On the other hand, the other side, those who are included are overwhelmed with just how much information is available. So maybe I want to turn it over to Aguil. I know that as part of the South Sudan project, you've done some work on the dissemination of accurate information related to COVID-19 and kind of public health guidelines as well. So maybe you could describe some of that work as well, and how you're able to engage youth in that process too.
Okay, thank you. As youth officer and in South Sudan, Search for Common Ground, South Sudan, we used to work with partners, and we focus much on the youth-led organization. And so through the partnership with some national organizations, it was very easy for us to reach many people, like the gang groups. We contact them through Anataban initiative, and like the IDP camps and Mangaten, we have been going there, so we already have access to the camp. That's why we were able to go and provide the hand washing equipments and sanitizers and face masks. For Lugara Shabab, we have our studio, Search for Common Ground studio. So we are using the 12 participants of Youth Talk project. They are the one who are producing the program. And by the way, their age is from 14 to 18. So the programs is produced by young adolescents who are 14 to 18 years old, providing information, giving recommendations, interviewing high-profile people like ministers and even people from international NGOs. And one of our adolescents, who is called Huda Izzadin, she was the one who interviewed the UN in special envoy, Ms. Yasma, when she came to South Sudan, and they are doing great work. And we used our WhatsApp group and Facebook also to get information from the people who are in the States. We make sure that we really get correct information about the situation of the people in the States also, and we see how we can really use it and reflect it on our programs, the radio programs. And we also produce different radio dramas to keep raising awareness also on COVID-19. On the recommendation, to the government, because in South Sudan, as I'm talking now, we don't have governors in our state. So if you are following the news recently, we just signed our peace agreement, and the implementation of the peace is on process. The revitalized government of the national unity. So we hope that we will have our governors in the state, because this is one of the challenge also that is really making most of the work of the organization very hard. So my recommendation to the government, first of all, they must acknowledge young people as partners, and also youth are used as negative force. See, so I really ask them to see them as partners and give them that chance to really do something positive, because they are not the way they are seen. Youth are seen as problem makers, but while they are not. And also I ask all the international NGOs, let them look at their partnership strategy. They really need to work with the youth-led organizations. There are many youth leaders on the ground who are doing a great work, but it is not seen, and they are not given that chance. So I really ask them, let them really try to develop or change their strategy of giving chance to young people, to work with young people. Another thing also, the last recommendation goes to the donors. So please, you try to support youth-led organizations also. And if we are really talking about youth empowerment, then they need to be helped also. Yeah, you need to donate to them, give them that trust. Yeah, because they are the majority and they can really do a lot. Yeah. And also youth need to be trained on capacity building. They need to be trained on capacity building and leadership skills, and and promote them also to be involved in peace building. Because if we are to talk about the future disaster, and when we look at what is happening in the world now, the only threat is not COVID-19, because during this COVID-19 now we are facing different conflict, and a lot of things are happening. So more efforts need to, to be put on peace building also. So try to empower them so that they get ready for any future disaster. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aguil. That was fantastic and very informative. I'll turn it over to Albina, who's of course part of government, to see, from your perspective, how governments can better support youth efforts.
Yes, thank you. Well, of course, I'm not directly part of the government of Finland, for example, because I'm a member of European Parliament. But of course, yes, I think that governments do have a very strong role in carrying forward youth initiatives and bringing young people on board. And how I feel about the situation is that it's often that young people are invited to events to speak about subjects like why young people should have a voice. And this is a bit like about the previous very good points that the previous speakers made, that it's important that young people are not only accessories, but they are actually heard. And I think that this means that in the governments, for example, they should very much make it possible for young people to, for example, run as candidates to different positions. Then when there are different laws or budgets that are being prepared, young people should be heard as any other people, and perhaps even stronger than other people, because young people are generally underrepresented in the governance. There are way too little amount of young politicians, for example, who would kind of represent their age group, and too small amount of people who are from activist background or young youth NGO background. So I very much believe that there is help needed in that from the governments, and this can be both resources and laws and just better processes. Because it's not that young people only have a say on that young people should have more voice, but they have their say on security policy, economic policy, climate policy, gender policy, all kinds of things. And I believe that the change is really possible. Of course, now in Finland, we are in a lucky situation because we have a young female prime minister, Sanna Marin, who is, I think, 35 years old. And of course, I represent my country as MAP, 27 years old. And I think that there is a bit less stigma around young people, that the Finnish people are actually electing young people also to lead in different positions. And this also changes the decisions, that usually people make then more decisions that are hearing young people. But I think that's not enough. We need to have young people involved in all structures and basically making the policies from different levels. They have to be heard. And one thing that the governments can do is, for example, this participatory budgeting. This is something we have done in my hometown, Helsinki, that young people are able to put their idea on how, for example, the city or how the country should use their funds and bring their motions forward in this way. I think that's a fair thing to discuss with all the generations on how our budget will be used.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Albina. And finally, I'd like to turn it over to Achalike to answer your question of recommendations for governments and other kinds of international agencies. Achalike, are you online? Hi, Achalike, can you hear us? Well, it seems like Achalike will have to rejoin us later at some point. Well, we can loop back to.
Hello?
Wonderful.
Yes. Sorry, I think I was still muted.
No problem.
Well,
No problem.
I think just to add to what the others have said, one thing which is very important at this moment is for the government to create opportunities for young people to engage. I'm saying so because we've had a lot of instances of young people who want to act, but there are restrictions. And so I think government must understand that young people play a key role, especially when it comes to being at the front line, not just because we have the demographic, we have majority of the population, but also because with the new technology that we have, I'm talking about in our African context, because we have a situation where people within government cannot even reply to emails. This is the freaking reality. But young people need to be given that opportunity to engage, because we've had several complaints of young people not given an opportunity to be at the front line. I think that is very important. When it comes to funding related issues, I feel that is very important. But what we expect more from our government is more of technical support and being accompanied in this process, because it has been highlighted. It's the same thing that we faced, and our rapid response laboratory can be able to produce 20,000 bottles today because of the fact that we were able to have, a validation from the Ministry of Public Health. It's very important. And at the same time, I think young people must understand that we must respect the norms. We must try to follow procedure to ensure that at the same time, it's a win-win for the government and us. And for international organizations, just to add, there's a lot of webinars happening. There's a lot of talk happening, but still, young people are not getting the support, the same support we've been complaining, of not having before COVID. The same problems we had for financial resources for our peace building response, which we're not having, is the same challenge we are facing at this moment. It will be very important that more pockets of, peace of funding for youth-led organizations should be created, or resources should be diverted to such response, and response with the same of spirit of this kind of conversation we are having, because there are many of us who work in conflict contexts that our works are facing challenges from being transformed or properly and implemented because we are lacking funds. It'll be very important. I think one young well did has just started something of this sort, of a youth kind of funding existing, and we need to have more of this. It's very, very important. And of course, international organizations need to understand that they need to partner with local, with youth organizations to be able to provide this response, and to know that we who have peace building background, especially in conflict situations, we are more effective to respond, because the example and the experience that we have in Cameroon and in other countries that we've seen is proving worth it, that young peace builders can be amazing at the front line to respond to COVID, especially in these conflict affected places. So without repeating a lot, I mean, these are just some thoughts which I feel that we just need to reiterate, because they are in this policy document, they are in all of the documents we always talk about, resolutions and all of that. I think people are dying, and it's a time for us to think differently and to act more faster and more concretely. I mean, these are just the thoughts I would like to share.
Great, thank you so much, Achaleke. I think those were all really great recommendations everyone had, and I echo everything that you all said. Particularly around the urgency. And I think we're starting to see governments understand that there's such an urgency. The US recently adopted the Youth Peace and Security Act of 2020, which is the first piece of legislation recognizing the importance of partnering with young people and also protecting them in their life-saving work. Here in the US, we're seeing so many young people go onto the streets and fight systemic racism and injustice. And unfortunately, some of those youth activists have been victims of violence in the streets simply because of their work. So I hear you on that, Achaleke, that governments and society need to do so much better in protecting youth and partnering with youth and really moving fast in that work. We're now going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar and our conversation today. And Achaleke, actually, the first question is for you. From one of our audience members, they said, Achaleke mentioned that many youth are acting as frontline workers to continue providing support to target communities. You had mentioned that they are joyfully carrying out this work and are taking opportunities that might not have existed before COVID-19. Can you speak a bit more about this? How are you informing youth about the risks they take on to do this work? So Achaleke, would you like to answer that question? And I also open it up to other panelists to add.
Yes, thank you very much. And I mean, the way in which COVID-19 came to our country, for example, you know, we had a lot of, we were very desperate to look for solutions. And we saw a narrative where, you know, young people were seen as the most protected, and continuously when lockdowns were declared, we could see young people hanging out because they felt they wouldn't fall sick, they wouldn't die. What we did, the first thing was to be able to change this narrative by creating a platform for them to come together. So we launched a call for volunteers online, specifically young people, where we collected data, information, emails on this platform for them to serve at different levels of our implementation in the field. But for this to happen, we focus on providing them resources to build their capacity, for them to have an understanding of what COVID is, because we realized that the lack of the coherence in the information was one of the reasons why there were these misconceptions. So we have this platform currently. We have a Telegram group where we share, you know, courses on COVID, to know more about COVID, to learn, to prepare them. And now, for example, in our rapid response lab, every day when we have production, we do a call. We invite some of them on the platforms, 2, 3, 4, to come to the laboratory to work. And we respect all the safety measures and preventive measures for this to happen. For those who go to the field for sensitization and all of that, you know, we ensure that we provide the mask and everything for it to happen. But the interesting thing is that continuously we've seen that our peers who have been engaged in this process are developing more interest and wanting to act even more. I mean, this just comes to legitimize the fact that young people just need an opportunity, a safe space, and capacity to implement and to engage. We are seeing these are platform budging. Now we are moving towards 1,000 volunteers on these platforms that have registered, and continuously the number is increasing. But safety is very important, and that's why we focus on giving them, you know, links to some of these courses for them to build their capacity. And why they are the front line in the communities, we ensure that they protect themselves. We ensure that we who are also on the field, myself, have been on the field several times, even in the hotspots of conflict. I have been on the ground, you know. But what makes it more stronger, more interesting is the fact that it's a youth kind of movement. We see ourselves as young people speaking to our parents, speaking to the elderly, who many of them had lost hope on young people because of their misconceptions. And this is helping a lot, not just to combat COVID, but to help to shift narrative, which we have on policy document, on the field, in communities, and working with existing peace building structures, UNESCO peace ambassadors that we've trained, mediators that we've trained in the community who are young people. These are persons who understand what community work means. These are persons who know what safety means because they have been through a process, and using them or working with them only comes to stress the importance that while we are developing peace building tools and training young people, we should be able to engage them in other processes where they are going to use these skills to effectively implement. I mean, these are just the background of what we adopted, and that's why working with prisoners even has been very successful. Prisonpreneurs have been very successful to work with their peers, to speak to their peers, because they have the capacity and they have been taught and given an opportunity to serve. I think this is what is very important.
Right. Thank you so much, Angelike, for that really great answer. Alvina, the next question is for you from the audience. So less than 2% of parliamentary seats worldwide are held by people under the age of 30. What is it like being a young person in parliament? How can youth increase their participation in governance? And where do you see international policy frameworks moving forward to support young people? Again, also open the question up for all of our panelists to answer too.
Yes, thank you from the great question from the audience. Well, I definitely think, I hope at least, that we would have some progression happening here, that the youth rights are progressing well. And I think that pandemics like this, of course, can take us also backwards. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think that after the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 and all the discussion after that, there is indeed some change in atmosphere. I know also that there are a lot more projects financed on youth activity and youth and peace. But what we also know is, of course, from this webinar as well, that there are a lot more grassroots young activists. So people in the grassroots level working for these matters. And when there is a momentum like this, I don't think that we will miss it, but I think that we will succeed to actually make something happen with this. And well, as a young person working as a member of the European Parliament, of course, I must say that it has been challenging. I think that you can probably guess that the middle age in the European Parliament is quite high. And I think that, of course, it's quite easy to gain the trust with your colleagues if you do good work. But then the small problem that there is sometimes that there is some structures that are not always supportive of young people and their activities. For example, when I started as MAP, I was not let in the Foreign Affairs Committee, perhaps because I looked too young or something like this. And that was funny, and the security guards would not let me in, and my older colleague had to come and explain that I'm actually MAP and I have a real badge that's not fake. So I think that there is sometimes this kind of attitudes that young people cannot be in high positions or something like this. And that is also that we have to just change by doing, And if you are a young person in your country, I really, really recommend not only activism in grassroots level and NGOs, but also to really taking a role in politics, for example, by standing as a candidate, if that's possible for you, or supporting other young people to also stand as candidates for the municipality level, city level, the national parliament, all the European Parliament level. Because now we know that it's possible. And well, also in Finland, when I ran as candidate, we were not thinking that we are going to succeed, because there have not really been many young people from Finland to the European Parliament, but we did succeed. So I think that this is really, it's possible, and I really hope that people get inspired by some other examples also across the globe, that they can also run despite their background. And I think that the governments and NGOs should be supportive of them in that.
Thank you so much, Alvina. That's a really good point. And one thing that's also exciting is in the US, we're seeing the youngest Congress ever elected in US history, and we're only going to see that get younger, I think, especially this year during such a critical election year. So it's really exciting to see young people like yourself really take on that inspiration and run for office. For the last question from our audience, Aguil, this is geared towards you, but also everyone else, please feel free to jump in. You had mentioned that COVID-19 was not the only threat at the moment. And this very much resonates with what's happening at the moment from young people in conflict. So, for example, Myanmar, Yemen, Northern Mali, Burkina Faso, Afghanistan, and Colombia all have ongoing peace processes and really deep-rooted conflicts. What is the role of youth in order to support peace processes, be it negotiation, implementation, or inside of the negotiation room during this time? Do young people also have close ties with non-state armed groups in order to promote nonviolent conflict resolution? And what challenges do they face in their role in supporting peace processes during a global pandemic?
Thank you. You know, it's very clear that with conflict, people, especially young people, need to understand that, you know, violence will never be a solution, and the experience has proved this one. And that's why what I can say that we give a space for dialogue. Need to give, like when I talk on the context of South Sudan, back to my country. So youth need to have enough space, because when you look at the military force, youth are the one fighting, and on the other hand, also you find young people are the one talking about peace, and so they really need that space to sit down and dialogue and understand the differences, so that they find the common ground, and also, you know, at least they can have one objective or maybe idea, because it's very easy for them to be manipulated. And that's why earlier I said that donors and international NGOs should really provide capacity building training and leadership trainings for them, because it is very easy to be manipulated, and they can easily be engaged in violence move. And this is what is really taking, you know, my country and I think other countries back. So they need to be involved in peace building processes, and like dialogue, and even like in my country now, what we are doing, me and some youth leaders, we are doing our best even to explain the peace agreement, because even access to information, others even they don't know their roles, they don't know their rights, they have no even idea of what they're supposed to do, and even you know, what is their right, they know nothing about the constitution and the agreement. So I recommend, if you find out some leaders who have that interest, who are potential to really promote, you know, non-violence act in the country, you support them. Yeah.
Thank you, Gwil. And Achaleke, I know you also wanted to answer this question.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I think I mean, I wanted to share something on this, because at the level of Cameroon, we last year we set up the first youth mediators network, and of young people who are the front line of the conflicts that we are facing, be it the Boko Haram insurgency or the crisis in the Anglophone region. Yes, we have some of our colleagues at the front line who are in contact with some of the armed groups, and their role was more effective before the pandemic, because some of them could have one-on-one, face-to-face conversations, but this is no longer possible, and it has made it more complex because they need to speak on phones and all of that, which is a bigger challenge. And they have been supporting mediation in GDR. They've been trying to mediate to see how these young people could drop and come back into the society. This is something which they are currently having a great challenge, because the one-on-one, the physical meetings can no longer happen like it used to be. But they need to speak on phones, and sometimes the phone calls and everything, there are a lot of other complications around that. It is really, really affecting these processes. And for the kind of peace process that we have in our country, which is still shaking, dialogue in the community had been a big problem. And that is one thing that we have been working on, doing this dialogue, providing capacity for local communities to understand the realities of conflict and what it means to have a peace agreement, what it means to what it means to mediate a conflict and all of that. but most of these physical meetings can no longer happen. And attempting to use maybe online training and all of that might not be very effective, also because of the fact that in some of these conflict hotspots, internet is a bigger challenge. We've had issues of internet shutdown which happened some last year or some about a year ago. I mean, these are the realities that we have. So in times of global crisis like this, it shakes a lot of things, and that is why looking for alternative ways to have access to communities is very important. And these mediators have been using these donations of hand sanitizers and others as a platform to be able to effectively communicate messages of peace, messages of living together, messages of collaboration towards fighting a common enemy. I mean, this is what we've been able to see, and I think that we should not lose sight. We should not feel discouraged if some of these physical meetings cannot meet. But innovation is the heart of who we are as young people. We need to tap into that and see how we are able to still respond even in very difficult moments like this.
Great, thank you so much for sharing, Achaleke. I'm actually from Afghanistan, and a lot of my work outside of search is focused on youth and peace building in Afghanistan, and we're seeing the same exact thing over there, where young people, while they are mitigating COVID-19 in the best way they can, they're also doing really important work to continue to have their voices heard in the ongoing peace process, and ensure that their thoughts and vision for the future of Afghanistan are included in the new government that's being formed. So all over the world, we're still seeing young people deliver conflict-sensitive aid and take their really important roles as bridge builders and peace builders, and nonviolent actors online and in different ways. And Mijul, that leads us into the last question from Q&A, which is for you. You had said that there are a lot of challenges to moving work online, and in some contexts, it's also opened opportunities to create a safe space that couldn't exist face-to-face, for example. Have you found any challenges in your practice that has gone online that could actually have been beneficial to your work in the long run? Do you see this really big shift to online platforms being able to catalyze your work in any way? And Rijal, can you hear me? Can you try speaking again?
Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I was not able to unmute myself. So yes, it actually forces us to look into better engagement with the community and the people. So we could find out that there are existing ways where you can facilitate online discussions in more meaningful way, and somehow try to replicate the kind of safe environment that we have in person or with a closed group. So we got to know certain of those methodologies, and I think we will definitely try to use them in longer run. At the same time, coming from youth organizations, one of the challenge for us is limited resources and young people's participation. Like we do not have, let's say, because of the resource, we do not have a lot of, let's say, staff capacity in the youth-led organizations. But now when we see that we can go online and we can still like do a lot of work online, because anyway we were forced to do a lot of work online, we felt that why do we need to limit to, let's say, having people only from one particular political geography, like only from India, let's say. Why cannot we just have people from all over the world? And that's why in our fellowship program in last 4 years, these are the people who remotely support our work for, let's say, part-time basis, like 6 to 7 hours per week kind of work. And initially we were having people only from India, but this year we thought to go all over the world, and we have amazing fellows joining our team for this next 1 year from all over the world. And I'm sure like that will help us also to do more work. We will have better people to support the same work that we were doing. And definitely some of the practices of safe spaces that we have learned, and we are still exploring how we can use them with communities, how we can maybe start doing something with Rohingya refugee community, which is not having enough resources, but maybe in future we can arrange some resources.
Right. Thank you so much, Majel. I think it's really interesting. I mean, right now, right? I'm in DC, Agil's in South Sudan, you yourself are in India, Achaleki's in Cameroon, and Alvina's in Europe. So it's the simple ability of technology to really bring us together and have these really important conversations. And we're seeing that it was happening before, but it's happening even more now. So that's, I think, a really exciting thing to see. So we have about 5 minutes left in our conversation. So I'd like to give you all a chance to give some closing remarks and maybe briefly answer the question. Despite enormous challenges facing young people around the world, what opportunities do you see for the future? And what about this specific moment of the global pandemic makes you hopeful about these opportunities? And how can young people get more involved in peace building?
Sure. Can I go first?
Go for it.
Yeah, a few points. Number one, we can see it gives us a picture that some of the changes in human lifestyle can actually recover a lot of environmental damage that we have done. So it's hopeful and it's reaffirm about that personal choices actually make a lot of impact. So that's number one. That's something hopeful. Second is we are able to revisit our needs and wants during this lockdown period, and because of which I hope we will be able to make better choices and young people will not be forced to fit into certain kind of boxes of a successful life as such, which is mostly dependent on economic growth only, but maybe we'll be able to think more for the society. Further, two things are that we are also able to see like how we fall into these spaces when we do not give enough emphasis to social policies and we give more attention to, let's say, militarization and those kind of economic growth or those kind of things. So hopefully government will be able to do will be able to have more attention for people and their rights, and definitely it will be more useful for everyone because we will be having hopefully better structures and better institutions in place. And the last is that maybe we couldn't avoid this kind of pandemic, but good that it is happening at this point of time where we are able to test most populist leaders all over the world, be it in America, be it in India, be it in Brazil. So we are able to see their actual performance beyond rhetorics or blame games, and actually can aim for better leadership maybe in future. As a young peace builder, like I think for building and sustaining peace, having a hope of having a better leadership is a huge hope. It can assure more inclusive decisions, and young people are one of the stakeholders for that. And also it can support policies for people, and in that way maybe little less work for us, the young people. So yeah.
Can I take the next?
Oh, Albina, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I have another meeting starting up, so just to be brief. Thank you so much, first of all. It was really nice to meet you all and hear your really great stories and your ideas. And just to say that I kind of agree with the previous idea that I hope that even though this crisis is tragic and it's very much about basic human survival, I really think that this is also a possibility to tackle one crisis that young people especially have been very, very scared about, and that is, of course, climate change. And as green politician, I really hope that now when we are rebuilding our societies, we are doing it responsibly to nature and to climate to prevent climate crisis. So I hope that there can be a solution like this that comes from this crisis, that we do not go back to business as usual, but really change how we live our daily lives. And another thing I hope that creates more attention now is health, access to healthcare all around the world, because we know now that if there is good access to healthcare, we can prevent these kind of pandemics from spreading better. And I really hope that the healthcare access will be universal to all. And now it's not the truth, but everybody has to wait for a long time to get healthcare. And if you're not rich, it's hard for you to get. So I very much hope that this is something that will change after the crisis, that we have this as a universal human right. Thank you so much for this great discussion, and I hope we will continue cooperation for young people and for peace and for human rights. And I will hopefully see you later. Bye bye.
Hi, Alvina. Thank you so much for joining us and for your really great remarks today. And thank you again for being a champion for peace and security within the EU Parliament. I will now turn
Thank
it
you so
to.
much.
Thank you. Have a great one. Achaleke, do you have some closing remarks for us? And then Abil will end with you.
Well, I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and just to reiterate that I think in this pandemic, this is a time that we young people need to demonstrate more leadership. And we've seen it in our continent, the rate of death is relatively very low. I think maybe because of our huge youthful population. So, I just want to sound a clarion call to different stakeholders and young people listening or who have been following up this webinar, that, this is a time for us to demonstrate even more leadership, and for us to build a sustainable path for generations to come after us, to be able to speak of this time in our lives where we were able to lead a process towards combating a global pandemic of this sort. This is just my last message of hope, and for generations ahead of us who showed us the same leadership, we want to keep doing the same to ensure that the ones who will come after us will do even more better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Achaleke. I definitely agree with you. Aguil.
Thank you so much. It was a great honor for me to be one of the panelists. So the opportunity I see is it is the right time for young people to show their leadership capacity and prove that they are not leaders. They are not the leaders of tomorrow, but they are leaders of today. On the other hand, also in South Sudan, it is at least it gave that signal to our leaders to focus more on infrastructure. At least now they know that they should really develop this country, and they should invest more on health and develop this country, because what happened now, the cost of COVID-19, most of the people who died of COVID-19, they are big people holding a very big government position. So it let people know that it's not like, before, whenever someone gets sick, you can easily just flee outside the country, you just travel. But now, with the close of the border, they knew that COVID-19 is a threat to everyone. So everyone can really get affected of it, whether you are poor, you are rich, you are a politician, whoever you are. So at least now people can really think of developing the country. And also what I see from COVID-19, unity. COVID-19 has united different communities now in South Sudan. Some communities that is very hard. We will never see them coming together to do something. But with coronavirus now, you find them sitting together, thinking on how to fight COVID-19 in the country, working together, seeing young people across, from all the communities, different political parties, fighting together, want to move in different areas in the country, which is really, I see as a good opportunity now to bring people together and, reduce that, change the stereotyping and that hate between young people. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aguil. I echo everything that you all said, and this has been such a fruitful conversation and has really shown, one, young people are very critical actors in mitigating COVID-19. Two, youth are really important in rebuilding societies after COVID-19. And three, this is a tipping point for our generation. And it is without a doubt that right now is going to be the time where we're all going to stand up and be leaders in our communities and say enough is enough, and really change unequitable systems in our society and world. And that's really exciting. And just simply hearing from you all has given me a glimpse of hope. And I know a lot of our audience members feel the same. So thank you to all of you for joining us today, for sharing your really important insights and your important work. And I hope you all stay safe and we continue to have these conversations and continue to build peace in our communities in the best way that we can. So thank you all for joining. Thank you to our audience members for joining. Again, you can download the Search for Common Ground policy paper using the same link that you used to register for this webinar. And yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.